Hardcore Hard Surface Modeling Episode 2. We're going to pick up from where we left off in the last episode, so if you haven't seen it already, then go check that out. And if you want to learn more about the techniques that you're going to see me use in this video, I explained everything that I know about Blender inside my Blender course. We're also going to teach you how to get your shit together so you can become a professional 3D artist, so you can be anywhere at any time like me. I'm in the forest right now. I don't give a fuck. Check out the link in the description, and let's get to work. Anytime you're modeling something with fucked up topology, you gotta start with the complicated part first. And then you're gonna use the geometry from that complicated part to make the more simple part. So in the case of this piece right here, we're gonna start by modeling this quarter circular hole first. And then we're gonna use the geometry from that quarter circular hole to shape out the rest of whatever the hell this is. Now, if you're trying to follow along, you gotta make sure that you're doing exactly what I'm doing. Don't try to make your own measurements. Don't try to figure this shit out yourself. Trust me, it's not worth it. I've been fucking around with this for hours. Trust me, this is the best way to do it. You're gonna place the 3D cursor at the origin point with Shift S, and with Shift A, you're gonna add a new circle which is gonna have 12 vertices. Not 60, not 9, 12 fucking vertices. Now in edit mode, you're gonna press GX-6 to move this by 6 units to the left. Then while your 3D cursor is still here in the middle, you're gonna set the pivot point to 3D cursor, Shift D, right click, rotate by 90 degrees to bring another copy of the circle up here to the top. Now you're gonna select the left half of that circle at the top and the top half of the circle on the left. Delete those two halves of those circles and then select these two vertices down here, press Alt-E, click on spin. Set the number of steps here to 8 in the spin menu and set the angle to 90 degrees. That's gonna extend these vertices and connect them to this circle up here. That gives you the quarter circular shape that you're looking for. So now we have to use this geometry from over here to create the rest of the surface, and here's how you do that. You're gonna go up here and check this tool called Auto Merge Vertices, and also in the options menu you have to check Auto Merge and split edges and faces. Now you have 8 edges on the inside of this circle right here. You're gonna select the 4 at the top first and press extrude right click and scale to 0 on the y-axis. Then select these 4 edges on the left side, extrude right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis. And because we have this Auto Merge Vertices tool enabled, these vertices are automatically gonna be connected. So they basically just cut through each other, kind of like a knife tool. Now take these 3 edges at the top here and slide them up with double G. Then take these 3 on the left and slide them to the left with double G. And we're also gonna have to add a loop cut here and here, because we need to have 5 edges down here so that we can match them with this grid background. When we add these loop cuts, we also get some new vertices here which we don't want, so we have to take these edges and dissolve them. Once we do that, we can add a new loop cut here with Control R. Then you can place the cursor on this vertex right here, scale this one up a little bit and join these two with J. Now you still got perfect topology on the inside here, but you got 5 edges over here and 5 edges over here. Now select this edge loop and go to W loop tools space. If you don't have any loop tools in this menu right here, you gotta go to edit, preferences, add-ons, search for loop tools and check this box right here. If you don't know anything about loop tools, that means you haven't been watching my videos. They probably sold you hard ops and box cutter and all this other shit, but they didn't tell you about loop tools. You don't need to buy no box cutter, you don't have to buy any add-ons, you don't gotta update Blender, you just need some loop tools, a couple of my videos, you'll be alright. You've been cheated. So subscribe to the fucking channel. Now you're also gonna use the loop tools on this edge loop down here at the bottom, and then you're gonna select the next edge loop and go to W loop tools G stretch and set the method to spread evenly. Do the same thing on this edge loop up here, also the one on the inside. Also use a space tool on this next edge loop down here and this one on the right side. You don't have to do that now, we're just splitting hairs, you'll be alright either way. But now place the 3D cursor between these two vertices on this semicircle down here and select this edge. Go Alt-E spin, set the angle to 180 and set the number of steps to 6. That way you're gonna extrude this in a circle and the geometry that you extruded is gonna match perfectly with this semicircle. You're gonna do the same shit over here on this top circle, but this time you're gonna have to use minus 180 degrees because now you're going backwards. Once you do this, press M to merge vertices by distance. I got a shortcut for this. My shortcut is Shift W. For you, it's going to be M. I'm also going to disable my auto merge vertices tool because it might just fuck something up for me. Place the 3D cursor on this top vertex right here and take this one down here. Extrude right click, scale to 0 on the Y axis and place the 3D cursor onto that vertex. Then connect these two vertices with F and give me 3 loop cuts up here and 3 loop cuts on the left. Now select these 8 edges that we have and these 8 edges on the inside and go W bridge edge loops, but you have to be in edit mode to do this. You won't have the bridge edge loops tool available in vertex select mode. Now place the 3D cursor on the side here and take this vertex and scale it to 0 on the x-axis. Then lower it down by exactly 1 unit. Place the 3D cursor on this vertex and scale this to 0 on the y-axis to line it down here. You can do the same thing with this vertex out here. And now we gotta fill in this little area. And to do that, we can just select these 4 edges, extrude them, scale to 0 on the y-axis while the cursor is still here. Give me a loop cut right here and snap this vertex to that vertex on the left side and also connect these two using the 3D cursor. And now you're gonna have to do the same thing over here on the other side. So place the cursor over here, align this vertex with the cursor and push it to the right side by 1 unit. Now place the cursor to this vertex and scale these two to 0 on the x-axis. And now we can just copy this little surface and bring it over here. To do that, we're going to place the 3D cursor at the origin point. Select and duplicate this little surface and rotate it by 90 degrees and scale to -1 on the x-axis. Now just merge vertices by distance. Now take these two edges down here, extrude them by 1 unit, extrude them by another unit, and merge vertices by distance. Now we got the part of the surface where we have this quarter circular hole, but we still have to create the rest of the surface. And to do that, we need to keep our 3D cursor at the origin point and take this vertex, duplicate it, right click, and rotate it by 180 degrees to bring it over here to the other side. Place the 3D cursor right there and take all the geometry from the side here, extrude, right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis. Give me 5 loop cuts so I have all squares right here. And while I'm at it, maybe I'll add another loop cut over here just to keep some consistency, which means I'm going to have to dissolve this edge right here. I'm going to do the same thing down here so I get a vertex on this part of the grid and also dissolve this edge. Now I just have to slide these vertices towards the middle here, merge by distance, and now the topology here is going to be perfect. While the 3D cursor is still in the corner, I'm going to take this edge over here, extrude, right click, scale to 0 on the y-axis, and give me 5 more loop cuts. Now we have all squares and the surface is ready. We just got to extrude it and add a couple more features to it. So extrude this surface and give it approximately this much thickness, as you can see right here. Take 2 edges from the side like this and extrude them out just a little bit. Use the medium point as pivot point and scale them down towards the middle like this, and also push this edge out a little bit more on the x-axis. Now when you go to top view and you add a subdivision surface modifier, this is going to look like a little circle sticking out. You can select this entire piece and duplicate it and separate it to new object. Now place the 3D cursor between these 2 vertices and go to object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Go over here to the top of the surface, select these 2 faces and get rid of them. Place the 3D cursor in between these 2 vertices. Snap this object to this position right here and rotate it by -90 degrees. Then join it with this object with Control J, merge vertices by distance. Now everything's connected. Now we just have to take a surface from over here and we're going to use that to create a ring where this attaches to the other object that we made in the previous episode. So to do that, we're going to place the cursor right here, take this entire edge loop and scale it to 0 on the x-axis just to straighten it out. Also do the same thing over here on the other side. And you might have to do the same thing over here with some of the perpendicular edge loops. Once you do that, you're going to select a surface like this, inset it with I, scale it down a little bit more on the x-axis to make this thinner. Now extrude this surface out like this. Take these 2 edges and lift them up a little bit like this. You're going to lift up a couple more of these segments because we're trying to make a nice slope down here. Once you lifted up some of these vertices, you're going to select these edge loops that go all along this ridge line. Go to W Loop Tools, Relax. Set the interpolation to linear and set the number of iterations to 10. Now we're going to scale this down a little bit to flatten it out a little bit more like this. Take this geometry and slide it backwards a little bit so we have this little angle. Now I'll place my 3D cursor on this edge, and with Shift A, I'm going to add a circle with 12 vertices, flip it sideways, bring it to the back right here. You're going to scale this up a little bit, and this is going to be the ring, which is going to attach to the other object so you can pivot the fucking camera. Rotate this by 45 degrees so we have an edge down here in the middle instead of a vertex. It's got to be approximately this big in comparison, but you might have to adjust that a little bit later. Now extrude, right click, and scale it up a little bit from the middle to extrude these edges outwards. Place the 3D cursor down here and take these 2 edges and scale them to 0 on the z-axis. Now we can delete these faces on the inside. Place the cursor over here to the side and scale this to 0 on the x-axis so it's aligned with the side. Now let's do a loop cut right here so we can have some more geometry to connect here. Also connect these 2 faces, these down here. Now we just gotta fill in the inside, so place a 3D cursor on this vertex right here and select this edge loop. Deselect everything to the right of this circle. Also select the loop in the middle, extrude, right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis. Now select the entire shape like this. Shift D, right click, scale to -1 on the x-axis to mirror it to the other side. Correct all the normals and merge vertices by distance. Now you got a ring here. We're just gonna adjust this geometry so it's not so tight here. Finally, we just have to bevel some of these edges, so we're gonna select this edge loop right here. Shift G, select similar face angles. As you can see, that selects all the sharp edges. We might have to deselect something, so we're gonna double check everything. Now we're gonna bevel all these edges simultaneously with Control B, and we need to make sure that we got 2 segments and a shape value of 1, because you don't want this to be curved. You want this to be a right angle like this. And you also have to go down here and set the miter outer from sharp to arc. That's going to improve the shape that you have on your corners. And now to prevent having n-gons or any fucked up polygons, you can just take these vertices and join them with J. That way you turn this n-gon into 2 quads. And there's going to be a couple more places where you're going to have to do something similar. In this case, we're going to have to add a loop cut here and join these 2 vertices. Same thing on the other side. And then down here, we're going to delete these 2 faces and take these 6 faces at the bottom, inset them with I, but press B to disable the boundary option right here. Now you can fill this manually with some quads. And over here we got the same situation going on, so just out of common courtesy we're going to clean this up. Use your knife tool, start to cut right here, click in the middle of the next face, then connect it with this corner, then go back, then go over here and do the same thing, then go back one more time and go to the last face, connected with this corner, come back and connect it with this vertex right here, hit enter. That gives you perfect perfect topology, you got quads only. Now you clean this shit up a little bit. Now you're gonna do the same thing one more time over here on the other side. Once you do that, the topology on this object is absolutely perfect. Now we gotta attach it to this shape and add some more details. First, we have to connect this piece to the object which we created in the previous episode. So we're going to select the geometry on the inside of this ring right here. Shift S cursor to selected object, set origin to 3D cursor. Now we have the origin right here so we can pivot this object around the ring. Now we're going to place the 3D cursor onto this circle right here at the top, and with Shift S we're going to snap this object to the 3D cursor. We're going to have to scale it down a little bit so that these two rings have approximately the same size. We also got to push it outwards a little bit like this, but now this moves the way it should move. This is where you're going to stick your phone. We're going to create some more stuff here later on. Now to connect this properly, we still have to push a bolt through this hole right here. So we're going to take this geometry right here and press P to separate that to a new object. You're going to scale this up a little bit so it's just a little bit smaller than this ring out here. Extrude that inwards a little bit like this, then take this outer edge loop and extrude that and move it along the x-axis to push it outwards. Now extrude it again and push it outwards a little bit further, but this time you're going to scale it down. Now extrude it inwards one more time, scale it down a little bit further. Place the 3D cursor in the middle of this edge loop in the back. Now take this and set the pivot point to the 3D cursor, extrude right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis. That's going to connect them perfectly. Now you can take all the edges which are supposed to be sharp and you can bevel them with Control B. Now you got the nut part of the bolt. Now we're going to have to create the part which you're going to turn with your hand if you want to loosen up the fucking screw. So take this edge loop right here, separate that to a new object again. You're going to scale this one down just a little bit, extrude that backwards, and you're going to take it all the way to the back side to around here somewhere. This part at the front here, you're going to fill with F and bevel with Control B so you make the corners nice and sharp. Now you're going to take this edge loop, extrude right click, scale up a little bit, then fill it with F, extrude it out a little bit more, scale it up a little bit more, extrude it out a little bit more, scale it up a little bit more, extrude it out again, scale it down a little bit this time. Now extrude it inwards a little bit like this. Take these two edge loops from the back and you're going to bevel those with Control B to sharpen them. Once you got the right shape, you're going to duplicate this with Shift D, then right click to snap it back into place. You're going to apply the 3 levels of subdivision surface on this duplicated object. Once you do that, you now have to understand that you have exactly 96 edges going in a circle around here. We had 12 vertices on this circle initially before we applied the subdivision surface modifier. We applied one level, that's 24. We applied another level, that's 48. Then we applied the third level, and it's 96. So you're going to select a face loop from here to around here somewhere. Shift D, right click, separate that to a new object. Once you separated it, you're going to take this little strip right here and inset it with I a little bit like this. Then extrude right click Alt S to inflate it outwards a little bit like this. You can slide this backwards a little bit and slide this part downwards a little bit if you want to. Now select all the sharp edges around the top and also all the sharp edges around the bottom like this. Control B to bevel them. Again, you want to have 2 segments and a shape value of 1. That's going to greatly improve your shading when you do smooth shading like this. Once you've done that, you're going to place your 3D cursor in the middle of this face down here. Then select this little strip, go to front view like this. Alt E spin, and you remember that we had 96 edges around the circle, so we need 96 steps. Check use duplicates right here. Make sure the angle is set to 360 so we got a full circle. Now we got a full circle of these little grippy things which you can squeeze with your fingers if you want to rotate that shit. Select everything, merge by distance, press Control N to correct the normals. Now select the knurling, select the object below, Control P, set parent to object. Now you got that little screw right here so you can rotate that to release this, and it's going to make it easier to pivot this thing right here. We're going to have to duplicate this piece right here later on, and we're going to have to use that up here where you're also going to be able to tighten up and loosen up this shit so you can pivot your phone around an axis which is normal to this surface right here. We have to use the geometry from this object if we want to make the next one. To do that, we're first going to set the rotation of this object to 180 so that the surface at the top is flat. It just makes it a lot easier to work with if you don't have any rotation on your object. Alright, now we can take this edge loop from the side right here. With P, you're going to separate that to a new object, and we're going to place the 3D cursor in the corner here so we can align this edge loop with the corner. So pivot point 3D cursor, set this to 0 on the x-axis. We're also going to dissolve these vertices right here on the ends which are caused by the bevel. Now you're going to place the 3D cursor over here on the other corner on the other side. Now take this edge loop right here, extrude right click, scale to 0 on the x-axis. We're also going to have to add 15 loop cuts right here. I know it's 15 because I just counted how many edges we got on this surface below. And now we got to extrude this a little bit to give it some thickness. We're going to make it a little bit thicker than the surface below. Then take the face segments from the sides of this surface like this and extrude them up a little bit more. Then extrude those out one more time and take these faces here from the inside of what you just extruded 3 seconds ago. Extrude right click Alt S to bring those inwards a little bit like this. This part here is going to hold some other shit, which is going to be what's holding your phone on this stand right here. Now if you're following along, you have to select the exact same edges that I'm about to select. This one here, this entire edge loop here, then all these edges around the top like this. Then select this edge segment on the inside here, which is also going to require you to select these edges right here so you have a clean intersection later on. And if you're going to select these edges, which you have to, you're also going to have to select these edges which are extended from those, which means you're also going to have to make sure the other side looks exactly the same. So you're going to select these edges as well. You don't have to select this edge underneath. Now you're going to move over to the other side where you're once again going to do the same thing. So just try to mirror what we did on the other side 4 seconds ago and you'll be alright. Now Control B to bevel this. You want 2 segments and you want a shape value of 1. That's going to make your intersections nice and clean, as you can see right here. I'm going to go Object, Shade Smooth. We need to have a metal surface on the inside here, so duplicate the surface, separate it to New Object. At the top here, you're going to select a 4x4 surface. You're going to inset that with I, but press B so you disable this boundary down here. X, delete faces, then take this edge loop, W loop tools, relax. We don't got to take this many edges, we're only going to take these up here. That's going to give us a nice round hole right here where later on we're going to be able to place some other kind of bolt. That's going to be the other side of this thing, which we're going to duplicate and place down here so you can loosen up and tighten this shit up as well. That way, again, you can pivot your camera around an axis, which is normal to this surface right here. Now extrude this plane to give it a little bit of thickness. Take 4 faces over here and 4 faces on the other side as well. Inset with I, W, loop tool, circle. With individual origins, you're going to scale these down a little bit more. X, delete faces. Now place the 3D cursor at a vertex at the bottom of the surface. Select the entire lower surface like this. Then press X, delete vertices. Select the entire surface at the pivot point of 3D cursor. Extrude, right click, scale to 0 on the Z axis, correct to normals. Now we're going to add some screws into these holes. Before we do that, select all the sharp edges like this and bevel them with Control B. Place the 3D cursor into the middle of this hole right here. With Shift A, you're going to add a new plane and scale that shit way down. Now go to top view and extrude these 2 edges and scale them up on the x-axis by 3. Then take these 2 edges, extrude, right click, scale them up on the y-axis by 3. You can scale this down a little bit more. Now W, subdivide this and select all the edges on the outside of this plus shape like this. Extrude, right click, scale this up, W, loop dual cylinders into a circle. Now you have the outside part of the screw. You can extrude this downwards like this. Take this surface on the inside here, inset that with I. Extrude that downwards a little bit, scale it downwards a little bit. Select loop, select boundary loop, Control B to bevel this underside here. Now you're going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Take this edge on the outside here, you can bevel that as well. Object, shade smooth. Place the 3D cursor in the middle of this other circle over here. Duplicate this with Shift D, Shift S, selection to cursor. Now the next piece is what holds your phone so it doesn't fall from the tripod or hit the ground and crack the fucking screen. The hard part about this is that it's all part of the same mesh. Everything has to be perfectly connected, and as you can see, it's a pretty sophisticated mesh. I'm gonna sit here for 10 days if I have to until I figure this shit out, because I'm a genius, and guess what? I figured it out because I'm a genius. Go to top view and add a new circle in the middle of this object right here. You can give that circle whatever number of vertices you want. Add a little bit more so it's a nice smooth circle and not some choppy shit. You can set the number of vertices to whatever you want, but make sure it's a high enough number that the circle is smooth. You don't want to have any choppy shit like 8 vertices. We're gonna pull that to the side right here so it's easier to work with, and with Shift A in object mode, we're gonna add another circle which is gonna have 12 vertices. Scale that circle down to approximately this size. This is gonna be this little shape that you can see right here. Lift that up and bring it out to the side of the circle like this. You're gonna rotate that by 45 degrees. Then delete the left side of this circle like this and select these 2 vertices. Press Alt E to spin. Set the angle to minus 90 degrees. And we're gonna use 20 steps for this because that means we're gonna have edges which are approximately equally long to these edges on the outside here. Now we can delete 1/2 of this because we're not gonna need it. Fill this here with F. Give me a loop cut, fill this and fill this. Now you can also take this vertex right here and use Alt E, spin with minus 90 degrees at the same time. Now you can also take this vertex right here and do Alt E, spin and set the angle to minus 90 degrees. Then again delete this half. Now we just gotta fill in the surface on the inside. So take this edge loop, take this lower edge loop, W bridge edge loops, do the same thing up here at the top. Once you've done that, you're gonna duplicate the entire surface and mirror it across the 3D cursor down here by scaling it to -1 on the x-axis in this case. Merge vertices by distance, and now we can start making the back side of this surface. First of all, we're gonna place the 3D cursor right here and take this entire edge loop in the middle, and we're gonna scale that down on the y-axis to bring it closer to the edge over here. We're just trying to get out of the way. We're gonna do the same thing over here with this next edge loop. Now you're gonna zoom in on this side. You're gonna notice that this edge over here is perfectly straight. You're gonna take the next edge and continue selecting this edge loop all the way to the other side, where you can also select the same edge. Extrude, right click, scale to 0 on the y-axis, and you're gonna bring that up to here somewhere. That's gonna give you this little surface on the inside here. Now you're gonna select these 2 outer edges and extrude them and scale them up on the x-axis approximately this far. This is going to be used to create these walls on the side here. here. So now you can extrude this entire surface to give it a little bit of thickness like this. Take this face right here, extrude it up to around here somewhere. I need a loop cut in the middle so I can take these two vertices and lower them down to around here somewhere. That's gonna be this edge right here. So now we're gonna delete this face at the top and place the 3D cursor right here so we can duplicate this shape and scale it to -1 on the z-axis. Once we've done that, I'm gonna need another loop cut right here. That loop cut's gonna allow me to create this angled part here in the front. So I'm gonna lift this up a little bit on the z-axis. We can fill in the faces at the top with F like this. Now we're gonna select these edges on the sides here and go to Loop Tools, G-Stretch, set the wrap method to project to straighten these out. Place the 3D cursor up here, select this surface and scale it up on the z-axis to angle it a little bit further. It's supposed to have a slightly different angle from this surface down here. And now we're gonna straighten out this edge loop down here by scaling it to 0 on the y-axis while the 3D cursor is right here. Maybe instead of 0, we can scale it down to something like 0.2 just so it's not too close to this edge loop over here. Now we have to make the wall in the back here and the roof. We can kind of think about this as the bench on a football field. I'm gonna get my knife tool and make a cut from here to down here. That angle once again has to be slightly different from this one. It has to be somewhere in between this and this. You can slide this all the way down and then once again use the G-Stretch tool to clean this up. But that might not be a good idea because then we got a triangle down here and I don't want to deal with that shit right now. Also give me a loop cut back here. Now delete these faces also on the inside on the floor here. Now we're gonna delete the entire other half of this object right here and place the 3D cursor on this first vertex up here. Select this entire edge loop, extrude, right click, scale to 0 on the z-axis. Place the 3D cursor on the next vertex, extrude this one more time and align it right here. For the sake of simplicity, we're gonna select this edge loop and go to Loop Tool, Space. That way when we place the 3D cursor over here and we select this vertex loop, we can extrude, right click, scale to 0 with Shift X to align these vertices with this. Now we don't have to align it manually with these vertices. Now we can just use 2 loop cuts and they're automatically gonna split this into thirds, which means they're gonna connect perfectly with this because we use the space tool. We can do the same thing again with these edges over here at the top. First we're gonna extrude this and align it with the vertex on this corner, then we're gonna align them with that vertex back there. Extrude, right click, scale to 0 with Shift X, give me 2 loop cuts and now we're good to go. Now another way to fill in the backside is to fill these 2 vertices with F, then make a loop cut, place the 3D cursor right here, align this vertex with the 3D cursor, then take this entire edge loop, go to Face, Grid Fill, set the span to 2 and adjust the offset a little bit. Now everything's perfectly connected. You got one half of the house. We're gonna duplicate the whole thing, scale it to -1 on the x-axis, correct the normals, remove the double vertices. Now when we add the subdivision surface modifier, it looks a little bit sorry, so we're gonna add some bevels. To add the bevels, we're gonna select all the edges which have to be sharp. An easy way to do that again is to select a few of them, then press Shift G, select similar face angles. We have to select this edge segment up here at the top, but I don't want to bevel this in here, so I'm gonna deselect that. Also deselect the same edges on the other side. We're also gonna select this edge in here because when we bevel that, we're gonna get a perfect shape with an arc outer miter. Then give me this corner back here. I'm gonna get rid of the subdivision surface modifier so I can see these inner edges. I'm gonna select those as well. Give me this one, give me the same thing on the other side. And since we're trying to sharpen these edges, we have to pay attention to how the intersection is gonna look. So if we bevel this with Control B, given that we have 2 segments and a shape value of 1, it's gonna give us this kind of shape. So if we also selected this edge loop over here, it's gonna create quads here, which means we can also get rid of this shitty shape right here if we select this edge loop on the inside. So if we want to bevel a major edge intersection like this, we have to select all the edges which are involved. Then when you bevel that with Control B, you're gonna have quads which are perfectly placed, and that's gonna give you good shading and good topology. Make sure that you do the same thing over here on the other side. You might want to duplicate this object in object mode and place it somewhere else to back it up, because this might completely fuck up your model. As you can see, you might forget about something, like I forgot about this edge up here, so we also gotta select that entire edge loop. That way the intersection here at the top is gonna be much better. Anyway, once we're ready, we're gonna bevel this with Control B. You can pick how wide you want this to be depending on how soft you want the object to be. And now just to stay clean, we're gonna add 2 loop cuts like this so we can connect these vertices and keep quads only. Same thing over here on the other side. Now we need to make some supports up here, so we're gonna take some faces over here on the corner, inset that with I, scale them down a little bit more on the x-axis, then delete the faces. Select these 4 edges and bridge them with W. Now we screwed up because we added bevels, and this is gonna be pretty hard to fill once we got some bevels. So we're gonna undo a couple of steps and go back to a time when we did not create these bevels. That's going to allow us to more easily inset this area, so we can delete these faces, fill this and fill this. Give me 2 loop cuts so I can fill these edges over here as well. Now I just realized that we don't even have to bevel this edge on the inside here, which is gonna make it much easier to take care of everything else. So now since we undid the bevels, now we gotta select everything again and do it all over again. But that's alright, because in any case, in general, 3D modeling is a lot better than working construction right now. So we're just gonna bevel this one more time. I deleted the whole half again, and I'm gonna duplicate this and mirror it to the other side, so we have this little support on the other side as well. Correct the normals, remove the doubles. Now this piece should be ready. Now when we add the subdivision surface modifier, you can see it looks pretty damn clean. Now we're gonna place that over here in the middle of this surface that we were making earlier. earlier. As you can see, it fits almost perfectly into this little corner that we made right here. But it turns out that this metal surface down here is supposed to also have this part sticking out, and that way this plastic bit can be connected to that perfectly. So we're going to select all the bevels on this metal sheet because we got to get rid of them. Once we selected them, X dissolve edges. Now we have the same object without the bevels. Now you can very easily just take this face and extend it a little bit further like this. Give me a couple more faces just to keep the geometric density. And it turns out that this step over here is supposed to be a little bit higher than this, but who cares? We're just going to lower it down so it's consuming the plate. Now we're going to once again select all the sharp angles here except these because we didn't get rid of the bevels here. Everywhere else we have to add the bevels again. Now you can parent this to the plate. Place a 3D cursor in the middle here if it's not there already. Now you can duplicate this and rotate it by 180 degrees around the Z-axis. We're going to push this out a little bit. Now we're going to have to completely remodel this step down here. So we're going to try and select all the geometry on this step here in the front. I'm going to use my brush tool to help me select this. Once I delete these faces, I'm going to delete this inner edge loop as well and try to align this geometry so it's straight. So place my 3D cursor right here and bring me these edge loops, scale them down to 0 on the Y-axis so that they're aligned to the front here. Do the same thing on the next one over here. Do the same thing to the next one. And now we're in a shitty situation because we already got some bevels here and that makes it really difficult to work with the shape. Luckily I made a backup over here which does not have bevels, so we can just use that one instead. So we're going to prepare this one in the same way that we prepared the other one, which means we're going to straighten out the geometry in the front. Now we can do face grid fill. We only need a span of 1, and once we do that we're going to have to position this so that it's right up against this side right here. We're also going to add a loop cut down here so that we can lift this up a little bit. Now select this little surface over here, extrude it all the way to the front like this, and we're going to have to align this geometry here with this curve on the inside. To do that, let's first figure out how many edges we have on the inside of this curve. As you can see, we got 24. I can check that because I got my statistics checked up here in the viewport overlays. The problem is that down here I got only 18 edges on the same length. So instead I can try to select a surface over here, Shift D, right click, separate that to a new object. Now extrude, right click, give me Alt S to inflate that a little bit like this. Make sure to check even offset. In vertex select mode, you're going to invert the selection and delete all the vertices from the back. Now we can join these two objects together. Now we just have to connect the geometry. To do that, we're first going to delete these faces in the front here. Now fill this, 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 fill this. As you can see, at some point the angles start to become a little bit too much, so we're going to have to do something about this. The best thing that we can do is make sure that we have the same number of edges here as we do over here like this. To do that, we can just select all these edges on the inside like this. Go to select loops, edge loops. That's going to select all the edge loops attached to the shape, which is going to be very good because they're all perfectly straight. X dissolve edges, and there are exactly 23 vertices between these outer vertices here, so we need to have 23 loop cuts on the inside like this. Select this segment, select this arc up here at the top, W bridge edge loops. That's going to connect perfectly. We just got to correct the normals. We also got to make sure to fill in the sides, which we're going to be able to do manually like this. Just to make things quicker, we're going to select this edge loop, mark seam in face select mode, select the entire right side, delete all the faces, place the 3D cursor right here, Shift D, right click, scale to -1 on the X axis, correct the normals, remove the doubles. Now we got to select all the sharp edges and bevel them. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before for the third time by now. Just select all the corners which are supposed to be sharp one by one. Make sure to take care of the intersections by selecting edges like this as well. We don't want to bevel this inner area. It might be easier to lift this up a little bit so you can see the underside. Then Control B to bevel, lower it back down, and now we have to create a cut right here through the middle. To do that, I'm going to add a loop cut back here and bevel it so that I get some squares like this. Now we can select a square surface like this, inset that with I, W loop tool, circle, scale it down a little bit. Now we're going to select the entire top half of the circle and the entire area around it. Also everything above that up here and all the way up at the top. We're not going to delete that just yet because we have to do something else first. Go to select loop, select boundary loop, Control E, mark seam. That makes it easier for us to select this once again later. Now make a knife tool right here, set that to Y axis, press C to cut through and cut through right here so we get a straight line. Do the same thing over here on this side, or maybe better yet, we have to take these edges over here and align them with the side of the circle like this. Once we do that, we have to use the knife tool to cut a line right here to make it straight, and the inside of this part is what we're going to be deleting, so we can take this arc right here and make a big hole. Now once we do that, we're going to join this and join this over here. Select this entire surface and just get rid of it. Also delete this part of the circle and everything in the front like this. Then we got to do the same thing underneath, so join these vertices here, join this here, delete the entire circle. Now you can select this entire edge loop, maybe deselect the edges from the front and go to W bridge edge loops, fill this, give me a loop cut right here and bevel that with Control B to turn it into 2 loop cuts like this. Fill this, fill this, fill this, fill this, fill this, fill this and fill this. Now I also want a loop cut here to control the shading, but that's not really gonna work. Instead, we can just select all the faces on the inside of this loop right here. Press I to inset, but press O for outset. Make sure to check edge rail, and that's gonna give you an extra edge around this to control your shading. Now you can lower this back down, and now we're gonna add some more elements here to connect everything. We're going to select this entire surface at the top and duplicate it and separate it to a new object with P. Then we're going to fill this hole in the middle, then select all the edges around this surface. Extrude, right click and scale this up. Select this outer face loop, press Ctrl I to invert the selection, and press I to inset and O for outset. When you do this, make sure to uncheck edge rail here so that you get a nice even boundary around this entire shape. Now you can delete this outer face loop. You're just going to have this nice thin edge here. Now give me a couple more loop cuts over here in the front so that I can go to top view and move them up to continue this part of the curve here. And now you can lower this back down and place it around here somewhere. Now I'm going to delete this face here in the middle and add a couple of loop cuts here to the left side. Let's try with 16 on this side and also 16 on this side. That way I can fill this face here and inset it with I until I get this nice strip in the middle. We're going to have to clean this shit up here first. So slide these edges backwards and place the 3D cursor between them. Then take these edges over here and move them outwards a little bit. We have to get this shape out to the end. And now we can delete this face. And this gives us roughly the shape that we're supposed to have here. So now we can extrude this surface out a little bit like this. Select all the sharp edges with Ctrl B. You're gonna bevel them. Parent that to the surface above, which we're then gonna lower back down to the main object. We're gonna have to push this hole backwards a little bit to reveal this hole down here. So select these two objects simultaneously. Select all this geometry right here. Do this from top view so you can select some geometry evenly and just shift it backwards a little bit like this. That's gonna expose this hole down here, and as you can see, we also have to make a hole in the surface below. So we're gonna take some faces like this. We're gonna inset them with I. W loop tool circle to turn this into a circle. We're going to scale that circular hole down a little bit and place it right around here somewhere. We have this on both sides of this object right here in between, so we can press W loop tools bridge. That's going to create a cylinder between those two holes, which we can bevel now with Ctrl B to make it sharp. And this is where we're going to bring back one of these. So duplicate this, delete the faces at the end right here and make this a little bit shorter like this. Place the 3D cursor right here and place the origin there. Rotate this by 90 degrees so it's going upwards like this. Now place the 3D cursor over here on the inside of this hole and snap this object onto that hole. We're going to make this top cylinder here a lot thinner so that it fits inside. And we fucked up because we should have also brought the knurling. So let's take the knurling, but first we're going to place the origin point at the end of this pin right here. So place the 3D cursor on this face, select this and place the origin point onto the 3D cursor. Now if you duplicate it, you can snap it to this face right here and it's going to snap perfectly. We just got to rotate it by 90 degrees. And that way you're going to be able to fit it here. So now you can just parent that and it's perfectly in place. We're also going to have to make the upper part of this bolt. So let's duplicate this circle, scale it down, extrude it up a little bit like this. You got to bring it above this top surface right here, at which point you can duplicate this circle and scale it up. Extrude, right click, lift it up to around here somewhere, extrude it one more time, scale it down a little bit, fill it, inset it with I. Extrude this edge inwards. Now bevel these two edges with Ctrl B. And the point here is that now when you screw this, it tightens up this so it pulls it downwards, which means the friction is going to prevent this piece from sliding backwards. And it's also supposed to be a little ring here, which is going to do the same thing from the bottom, so you can't pivot this around. So let's take this cylinder right here, scale it down and make it a little bit wider. You're going to separate that to an object, fill the top, fill the bottom, bevel these two edges right here. You're going to lift that up so it's right around here somewhere. And by the way, if we want to get technical, the point where this is supposed to get more narrow is supposed to be right around here somewhere. That way, if this is a ring, you can inset that with IW loop tools bridge. It's going to fit perfectly around this little circle at the top. So now when you tighten this shit up, this is going to be holding this down. And let me parent a few things so I can show you how this mechanism is supposed to move. You're going to take this object and this one over here. You're going to parent that to this part right here. This is supposed to be parented to the knob, and the knob is also supposed to be parented to this part down here. Now the origin point of this shape has to be exactly in the middle, so we're going to place the 3D cursor exactly in between this geometry that I just selected. That's where we're also going to place the origin point. So now if we rotate this around the origin point, you can see that the knob moves through this hole that we created earlier. So the point is you can loosen this up and it's going to allow you to rotate this sideways. Now your phone is going to be standing like this as opposed to what we had before like this. There's only one last thing to add here, and that's going to be the shit at the top here, which is supposed to hold the flash. So let's make that in the next section. So first we're going to pivot this here by minus 90 degrees so it's standing up straight like this. And by the way, let's get rid of all this other bullshit that we have left over from before by selecting it all and pressing H to hide it. You can unhide your stuff by pressing Alt H, or in my case Option H, because I'm using a fucking MacBook. But not for long, because MacBook ain't shit. But I'm going to get a monster of Windows laptop soon, so maybe I can do a video where I compare Blender on a MacBook and Blender on a monster Windows laptop, so you can sit somewhere on a beach getting your dick sucked using Blender. Now we have to attach a cylinder to the top surface right here. The problem is that this cylinder has to be attached partially to this area here as well. So let's place the 3D cursor on a piece of geometry which is exactly in the middle of this object, somewhere around here. Then we're going to activate wireframe view up here in the viewport overlay so we can see the geometry of this mesh without editing it. Now in object mode, we're going to add a circle right here. We're going to reduce the radius of that circle, change its y-axis location, and the reason I'm changing it in this menu is because if I change it without this menu, the menu is going to disappear and then I can no longer change the number of vertices. But I have to be able to control the number of vertices because I want to see how the geometry is going to be able to connect with the geometry of this surface below. So I'm going to adjust it right here. I'm going to increase the radius a little bit like this. I'm looking at this thing right now. I know it's supposed to be approximately this wide. As you can see, the geometry is not too bad, but I am going to add a couple more vertices. Let's try 40. 40 doesn't work too well, but it looks like 36 does. So let's duplicate these two objects so we got a backup. Now we're going to get rid of the subdivision surface modifier and generate a new Boolean modifier, target this cylinder right here. We definitely don't want to go all the way through, so we're going to bring this bottom part of the circle up to around here somewhere, but we do need it to connect over here, so we're going to join these two vertices with J, place the 3D cursor on this edge right here and use the shear tool. Select this face and you're going to shear that downwards, but you have to use your 3D cursor as the pivot point. Now you're going to be able to push that into the object like this without making it cut through the other side. So now if you apply the Boolean modifier, you can get rid of the cylinder. You can also get rid of the faces at the bottom here. Now you just got to spend a little bit of time connecting this geometry here. We're going to need some loop cuts here so we can properly connect it with these vertices on this side up here at the top. Once you're done with the Boolean cleanup, you can extrude this and lift it up above the surface like this. In this case, we got a problem. We got to get rid of this bevel first. So we're going to delete this circle at the top and get rid of this part of the bevel here. We're going to bring it back later. So just X dissolve edges. Do the same thing over here on the other side. Now you can extrude this up and flatten it out again. Now you have more even space between your edges. So now select all the edges which you want to bevel, including these edges here, but not the last one all the way over here. We're going to bevel that with Control B. Once you do that, you can just join these vertices like this, dissolve these edges right here. Same thing over here on the other side. And before you know it, you got a damn near perfect cylinder here at the top. Now let's just separate this whole cylinder into a new object so it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. We're going to extrude this outwards. We're going to select the same number of edges on two sides like this. In this case, that's a total of 20 edges. With individual origins, we're going to scale to 0 on the x-axis. Then take the remaining edges and scale them to 0 on the y-axis. Now we're going to take these edges from the sides and extrude them outwards a little bit. Extrude this whole thing up and then take this circle from the middle and you're going to duplicate that and bring it up to the same level here. Extrude this outer edge up a little bit to give it some thickness. Then place the 3D cursor here, duplicate this circle, scale it to 0 on the z-axis to align it right here. Also do the same thing with these faces at the bottom on the sides. We could have just selected all these faces right here and scale them to 0 to align them here. We would also get the circle, whatever. Now we're done. Scale this down, then take these edges over here from the sides, extrude them up a little bit, extrude them up one more time. Now once again, take the two face strips from the sides and the inside like this and extrude them inwards. And we're going to need to place a screw right here. So you're going to extrude this downwards. You can bevel these edges right here. Take this vertex loop here. You're going to separate that to a new object. Now we got 36 edges, which is very convenient because we need to have a hexagonal hole in this little screw. Now 36 is a multiple of 6, so that's going to make it very easy to connect everything. With Shift A, we're going to add a new circle with just 6 vertices. Scale that down so it's right here in the middle. Now 36 divided by 6 is 6, so we have to subdivide this and turn each edge into 6 edges. So we're going to W subdivide, set the number of cuts to 5. That turns each edge from the hexagon into 6 edges in total. So we can take these two circles, W bridge edge loops, it's going to connect them perfectly. Extrude this part down, then extrude this one down separately. You can do phase grid fill if you want to be a nerd. We're going to set the span to 6 and adjust the offset a little bit. Then you're going to extrude this inwards a little bit and push it down. Now select these edge loops over here and bevel them with Control B. You can go object shade smooth if you want to. You can do subdivision surface. You don't have to do that. Now we're going to merge this part back down here and bevel everything. Take this edge loop, then select these edges from the front, but not the ones from the corners here because those are supposed to stay round. You also don't want to select these edges here, but you do want to select the edges on the inside. We're going to do the same thing one more time here at the back. And we're also going to have to select these edge loops on the inside like this. Now we got a subdivision surface modifier so we can bevel this with Control B to see the effects of the bevel. As you can see, this part here stays nice and round. Maybe it would be a good idea to select this part and also the other one. We're going to do that from front view, so we also select these faces right here. Now we're going gonna press I to inset this, but make sure you check outset down here. That's gonna give you a new edge loop out here. We're gonna slide both of those edge loops all the way out to the end. And now you can select both of these edge loops and scale them down towards the middle a little bit. And if we do that only at the top, we're not gonna intersect with this geometry down here, but we are gonna be able to use this geometry to control the shape of this curve right here. Now, don't ask me why, but there's also a tiny little screw back here. So with Shift A in object mode, we're gonna add a hexagon and scale that down. Lift it up to around here somewhere. W subdivide, let's get 2 cuts. Extrude, right click, loop tool, turn this into a circle like this. Now extrude this outer part downwards like this, but the inner part you're gonna extrude inwards. At the bottom, once again, you're gonna go face grid fill, set the span to 3 and adjust the offset a little bit. I'm gonna bevel the edges here for shading purposes. Object shade smooth, and this whole thing is supposed to be a lot smaller still. I have no idea what it's doing there, but we're gonna parent it to the rest. And now the second object is complete. Now you can stick your phone on this tripod. And the next part, we're gonna model the tripod itself. So we're gonna model the beads that make the whole thing stand up. Until then, like the damn video, and I'll see you in the next one.